sentiment, benevolent. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence, wanting nothing, we practice ego Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of non-violent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Om Amoka Vairocana Mahamudra Manipadma Jabala Pravataya
Please stand for the 3 refuges. We will take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And in keeping with our tradition, we'll do that in Sino-Korean. Even if you don't know the words, just follow along, throw your voice in. This is a sound practice. Chi-sim Quim-yang-e Shi-Huang Dam-se Che-man
Shivam Samse Shemram Chale Samshu
And now in English, we'll use a little different version. I go for refuge to the Buddha.
I go for refuge to the Buddha.
My deeply awakened mind,
My deeply awakened mind,
which must be cultivated to be known fully.
which must be cultivated to be known fully.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
Truth manifesting everywhere,
Truth manifesting everywhere,
which must be cultivated to be known fully.
which must be cultivated to be known fully.
I go for refuge to the Sangha.
I go for refuge to the Sangha.
Deep friendship and interconnection of all beings,
Deep friendship and interconnections of all beings,
which must be cultivated to be known fully.
which must be cultivated to be known fully.
Please return to your mats and cushions for another 5-minute period of meditation. follow along for some mindful stretching exercises. Please sit comfortably for the Dharma talk. Good morning, Dharma brothers and sisters. Our most important scripture in Buddhism is the Dhammapada, which is the sayings of the Buddha. And one of my favorite passages from the Dhammapada goes like this: "You are a seeker. Delight in the mastery of your hands and feet, of your words and thoughts." There's a lot for us to unpack in this saying. The first one is, you are a seeker. And in Zen, that means get curious about what's going on in your life. Not this week or this month, but right now. Your direct experience right now. Another message in this passage is about gratitude. Delight in the mastery of your hands and feet. This is something that we often take for granted. especially when we get lost in our thoughts. We can take that for granted. There are many people who do not have mastery of their hands and feet. A couple of my relatives have diseases like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease. And when I remember this, I can appreciate my own mobility more when I'm doing simple things like walking along a path or doing prostrations or something like that. My parents told me that when I was born, I had hip dysplasia, which is that the ball and socket joint in one of my hips was not formed yet completely. And so I had to wear a brace on my leg until I was about 2 years old. And I have home movies of me walking with this brace. And my parents and grandparents who were worried about me in 1970 were happy later on to see that I could walk without any problem. And then the passage says, delight in the mastery of your words and thoughts. We have mastery of our words if we take the time to stop instead of just reacting. And sometimes that's easier for us to do, and sometimes it's harder for us to do. For example, if we feel attacked, we're often inclined to just react without taking that time to stop before we consider our words. Do we have mastery of our thoughts? I think so, but in a different way than we have mastery of our hands and feet. In the Heart Sutra, it lists 6 senses, not 5. There's sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste, and who knows what the 6th one is? Mind, consciousness. Yeah. So Buddhism considers our thoughts to be a kind of portal for incoming information, just like the rest of our senses. And when I think about it that way, it helps me to not get too invested in my thoughts. Because our thoughts are going to come up, and our thoughts will sometimes be crazy, whether we want them to or not. And perhaps if we meditate enough and we have enough degree of equanimity and strength of will, then we may have fewer distorted thoughts, but we'll always still have some. And I think the mastery that we can have is choosing whether or not we believe our thoughts. There's this beautiful quote that says, "Don't believe everything that you think." And I was trying to look up who originally said that. Some sources attribute it to Robert Fulghum in his book, All I Really Needed to Know, I Learned in Kindergarten. The author Eckhart Tolle, in his book, The Power of Now, calls this watching the thinker. And so much of the time we identify with our minds, and we think that we are our minds. He says, remember that you are not your mind. You are the one who is watching your mind. You are watching the thinker. He says here, the beginning of freedom is the realization that you, let me go back a little bit. He says, the mind is using you. You are unconsciously identified with it, so you don't even know that you are its slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without knowing it. And so you take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there's a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought. that thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. I like this quote because it points to the possibility that we can master our thoughts, just as we master our hands and feet. And part of that mastery is we can choose how long we want to dwell on negative thoughts. When we have a retreat here at the Zen Buddhist Temple, one of the instructions that we're given in the retreats is don't dwell on negative thoughts. And we can choose how long we want to cultivate positive thoughts as well. Another one of my favorite books is this one, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. This one was popular about 10 or 15 years ago. Oprah really liked it, and so it caught on. And it's not specifically Buddhist, but it draws, like Eckhart Tolle's book, it draws a lot on Buddhism and other spiritual traditions. And Michael Singer has a whole chapter in this book, it's chapter 2, called Your Inner Roommate. And he says the way to catch on to what your inner roommate is really like is to personify it externally. Make believe that your roommate, the psyche, has a body of its own. And just imagine that another person is saying everything that this inner voice would say. And when you really observe what it's saying, you realize that it's pretty neurotic. And it always has a problem with something. The mind loves to solve problems. I know that my inner roommate can sometimes be a real jerk. He's a perfectionist. He's sometimes unsatisfied. His mind is often off somewhere else. He often wants to be doing something else. He wants to go to a coffee shop, or he wants to go to Detroit and just hang out in the lobby of the David Whitney building and look up at the big atrium. Like the skylight in the atrium, instead of being where he is. So Michael Singer continues in this book by saying, you're ready to grow when you finally realize that the I, who is always talking inside, will never be content. Buddhism translates dukkha as suffering, but maybe a more closer translation is unsatisfactoriness. Thinking that there's things aren't quite right. Another way that he frames this is, Michael Singer frames this, is stop thinking about yourself. You guys know that studies have shown that volunteering, for example, helping others, is one of the best things that we can do. Not only does it directly benefit other people, but it can also be a very effective way of improving our own level of satisfaction. I find that in my work with students at the university, when I take the time to help the students with their projects, it helps them, and it's also satisfying for me too. One of the books that we study in the seminary is The Practice of Perfection by Robert Aitken Roshi. And in this book, he relates the brief but famous Zen encounter where a monk asks Zhao Zhou, Master, how should we use the 24 hours? And Zhao Zhou replies, you are used by the 24 hours. I use the 24 hours. Sometimes we're used by our thoughts. There's a lot of people who go around most of the time being dragged around by their own thoughts. When he comments on this, Robert Aitken Roshi says, thoughts are the universe coming forth in the mind, just as it comes forth in the cry of the gecko or the shining of the leaves. And then he asks, how do we deal with our thoughts? Robert Aitken says, dealing with our thoughts is not a tug of war. Just take one long, deep sigh. And this can help us to dissociate ourselves from our thoughts. In other words, when we observe our thoughts, we can decide whether we want to believe them. I can observe a thought that I have, and even if I do believe it, I can watch to see whether I'm getting carried away by it. Thoughts are input. Thoughts are not inherently part of us. One of our 5 precepts in Zen is, I will not partake in the production and trading of firearms or of liquors or chemical poisons which confuse and weaken the mind. The other 4 of the 5 basic precepts are analogous to 4 of the 10 commandments, right? Not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to use sexuality inappropriately. And they're also analogous to spiritual guidelines in other religions. But Buddhism considers guarding our minds to be of such importance that it makes it one of the top 5 moral guidelines. I think that's interesting. When I was in college, I lived in a house with a bunch of housemates, and we were in an engineering school, and there was a lot of partying on the weekends, trying to relieve the stress of, the studies. And during some of the parties, we'd invite a lot of people, and there'd be a different drink in each room. And after college, I hardly ever drank. And nowadays I think, wow, it's hard enough for me to try to get control of my mind in everyday life. Can you imagine if I were drinking? That would be almost impossible. So now we'll pass around the microphone, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on any of this that we've talked about. And after you tell us your thoughts, you can consider whether you really believe them or not. Just raise your hand if you have a comment. Yeah.
So I remember being a little girl and very petulant and saying to grown-ups around me, "You are making me mad." And the very wise grown-ups around me explained, "I'm not responsible for your feelings." But as a little girl, I filled in the next part, which was, well, if you're not responsible for my feelings, that means I am responsible for how I feel. And so I lived my childhood, my young adult years, even into my later adult years, thinking I'm responsible for how I feel. And a part of that was ego and control, and that felt pretty good to think, oh, I'm in charge of how I feel. And then I went another step, and I thought, well, if I'm in charge of how I feel, I'm also in charge of what I think. And I lived that way a long time and suffered because of it. And it was only probably in the last couple of years, a wise friend had a conversation with me and said, no human is responsible for how they feel. And I said, well, I call BS on that, because I was told as a child, no one is responsible for how I feel. So that means I must be. And you're like, yep. And I got some more bad news. Guess what? You are also not responsible for your first thought after that feeling. And that made me really mad, because I just had to give up a lot of power. And I said, well, where does my responsibility start? And the answer was second thought and your first action. And that blew my mind. And it was crushing because I had to release control over, oh, I'm really in charge of how I feel. I'm never in charge of how I feel, ever, ever. I'm not in charge of any of my feelings. And I'm never in charge of that first thought after any of those feelings. But I can be responsible for that second thought and then the first action I take. I appreciate all of you today. Thank you.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Because I've always had an active imagination, I thought I'd share this to add that for sure the thoughts can trigger the active imagination, which can lead to a whole stream of consciousness that creates realities and narratives that likely aren't even real, but then act upon it, like jumping to conclusions, expecting worst case scenarios, doomsday, all of those things tie into thoughts when I'm up. And yeah, I've spent a lot of time learning to rein all that in. As someone who's pretty sensitive to energies, especially even just letting go of identifying with anything, including being highly sensitive and all that. So I appreciate the talk and being here. It's my first time here, so very lovely space, and I'm grateful to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning. You know, my early practice, my Buddhist master once said to me, he said, young child, learn to master your thoughts, master your words, and master your body. He said, in all things, learn to become a master of what you say, do, think, and feel in every moment. He said, young child, you're your only master. Who else could it be? I find great joy in complimenting others. I'm talking about a legitimate, genuine compliment. To see the joy on their face. How do I make it an effort to go to Walmart and I see a young lady or a young couple with a small child and I comment on how cute that child is? Oh my goodness. They face light up like the stars at night. And don't let me mention that to a grandma. So her heart is filled with joy, and so do mine. So I learned to have positive thoughts, positive words, and positive actions in this lifetime. And that brings so much joy to me. So yeah, I master my thoughts. I just don't react. If someone acting angrily towards me, it tells me one thing: they are suffering. And I have a compassionate heart for the suffering. And I don't respond or react to it to increase their suffering. Thank you.
Thank you for your Dharma talk, Mandamak. I was wondering if you can maybe speak to like some strategies or examples you might have when you find yourself, wishing you were in a different place or feeling your mind kind of, run off. I think for myself, I will try to use like curiosity or even humor or something to, when I keep coming back to a certain thought, like, wow, this is kind of hilarious. I thought about this 100 times today, or just kind of getting curious of like, this is interesting, right? That I'm kind of feeling this way or thinking this thing. Let me, get more curious about that. I know that Tara Brach has a framework, the RAIN, recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture, as a way to kind of work through the messiness of our minds. But I was wondering, if you can speak to some examples or ways that you do that for yourself.
Yes, the curiosity is a really important one, as you mentioned, because we're inquisitive and just wanting to investigate the situation dispassionately without getting really caught up in it and personifying, And probably the hardest time to do it is when we feel that we're attacked verbally, like when we feel that someone said something that is really attacking us. And one of the things I try to do when I feel like that is to just remember there's nothing here to preserve or protect. If you look at the 5 aggregates, what is a self? What is really a self? And if we look, we can't find a self here. We can find a body, we can find thoughts, we can find awareness, and so on. But just remember, there's nothing here to preserve or protect. That's kind of an extreme thought, but it can shock us into thinking, oh, okay, is that perceived threat really realistic? Like how realistic is it? How likely is this threat that I perceive, how likely is it to come true? And remember our interconnectedness with everyone else and everything else, including the person who we're having a confrontation with at the moment. Other comments about not believing everything that we think? Mastery of our thoughts.
I guess I deal with a lot of intrusive thoughts and and rumination, focusing on bad things, and I found meditation helps so much for that sort of thing. I'll sit in meditation for 15 minutes and it just gives me a different perspective.
Yeah, in meditation, we can start to notice the patterns of our own minds, right? It's very often that we just fall off onto some path that we're following in our thoughts, and then we realize, oh yeah, I'm thinking about that again. And it's important to acknowledge that. Oh, I tend to think about that a lot, whether it's rumination or a certain situation. And then it starts to have a little bit less hold on us. Other thoughts, questions?
I've been working just on my own meditation practice, and something I've heard from other teachers is distraction is an opportunity for the mind. I think when I started, if I got distracted, I would feel kind of down on myself and like, oh, why am I so distracted during this practice? I should be focused. But thinking of it as an opportunity has been very helpful, and I think it's helpful in life to think of just the times I'm distracted or get carried away or ruminate, and but then when I reach kind of that second thought and see myself doing it, I can think of it as, oh wow, I've come really far to get to this point where I can recognize these things. So.
When it comes to having those thoughts that repeatedly come up over and over and over again, what I've been trying to figure out, and I'm a little bit closer these days, is what to do when exhaustion comes. Like, this is the 10th time in 5 minutes I've thought this. Or bigger numbers and smaller times, things like that. And I have just decided that this is sometimes what I just need to do, and that's okay. But perhaps there's a question here of, is there a way to work with that exhaustion if things keep coming up and they don't stop?
Does anyone have a comment on that? That's a good question. Is there a way to work with that exhaustion if it keeps coming up, if the thought keeps coming up?
I think my husband should really answer this, but he wrote a book recently, Return to the Brain of Eden, and there is a lot of potential that when we are so, especially in Western culture, in our left brain, which is always ruminating and really prides intellect and all of these left brain analytical virtues or skills, it is exhausting. And when we are more in our right brain, anyone who's an artist, who dances, who does something where you just are really loving what you're doing, and it's like you lose all sense of time, you're in such a place of flow and joy that how could you be exhausted? You're just elevated by loving what you're doing in that moment. It's like you're allowing yourself to be that vessel for spirit to channel through you. And so that's just what occurred to me is anything that might get you out of the left brain might be at least a place to start. And there's always that first, like the woman over there said, that first thought or that first second after the pause to take a sigh of relief, even if you have to just jump up and down or find some kind of any kind of new activity that just engages your creative and active mind, your physical body, anything that might get you more in the right brain, and maybe a place to start to help not feel so exhausted. And in the very least, if I really feel like that, I just lie on the ground and pretend that I'm outside if I'm not, and just ask to release all the heaviness into the earth and let the Divine Mother take it on. And it becomes like fertilizer for new soil, new seeds to be birthed up through that. So any kind of thing that you might find that will resonate with you that can switch might be a place to start.
Tracy, I'd like to riff on what Tracy said. To get out of your head and to get embodied. My daughter was going to school at the University of Denver, and we were often in communication. She's really frustrated in lots of things, and sometimes I thought she was going to commit suicide. But her head was just dragging her. Go clean the toilet. Clean up your bathroom. doing something. And so I think we have to learn to say, honey, to ourselves, go clean the toilet, or whatever your version of getting embodied. Thank you for bringing me that. She still does it, actually. 30 years old and tough.
Something from the audio-visual department. I think what we're talking about is learning to live with oneself, right? And we all want to be perfect. We all want to have perfect thoughts. We all want to be good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we approach something we don't like, we recoil from it. And I'm getting this all from my practices, that it's exhausting, right? Having all these negative thoughts are exhausting. One of the insights I've had from that was, all right, how about I just start releasing things instead of keeping them? But then one day I was walking and I was very troubled, a little angry. And one of the senior monks came up to me. He goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm having these issues. I'm thinking about this and that, and I'm going for a walk." And he just smiled and said, "Okay, enjoy." Sometimes when I have stuff that comes up that I've been dealing with, I just smile at it. Oh, there's that again. Okay, well, I'm going to go clean the toilet or whatever, right? That was a big practice of mine because I have just a lot of luggage to unpack. It's just learning to laugh at yourself, learning to laugh at whatever this thing keeps coming up with. Right? Thank you.
Good morning. I guess not to oversimplify something else, it is very complex, but a quote that I think I read was from Suzuki Roshi, and it was, open your front door, open your back door, let your thoughts pass through, but don't invite them for tea. And I think just if I can remind myself of that a lot of the heavier stuff goes away. So, for what it's worth.
Again, I think I needed to say this. You know, when you shared about the non-self, that brought a great joy to my heart. In my early practice, when I entered the Buddhist temple meditation hall 25 years ago, my teacher would say that the eyes see, the nose smell, the tongue taste, the ears hear, the body feels, and the thinking mind think thoughts. Where's the self? And as I continued my practice, I was so scared I told myself, I said, they're trying to make me get rid of me. Until I finally understood what that really meant. There was never a me in the first doggone place. That's just a concept or an illusion. And once I realized that, I understood it gave me a great, great, great freedom. Thank you.
We probably have time for one more comment. We can do two.
Just sharing reflectively. The book I'm recently reading is called Chatter by Professor Ethan Cross here in Michigan. And he's talking about this from like psychology and neuroscience perspective, like how the mind is constructed in a way that we can have this internal conversation. And it's very like the remain analogy, saying, and one of the main thing he was saying is that because this voice is too close to me, to so-called conscious, and it is hard to separate the automatic voice with the conscious experience. And one thing he was saying is that people are very good at giving advice to other people, but not to themselves. So one of the strategies he was saying is that you can try to call your own name, and as you are like giving conversation with the other person, saying, "How would you do with your name in this situation?" And I was trying to do that practice, and I found it very helpful in some way. But I also find like connecting your body, like Casey mentioned, is really helpful. So thank you.
Jagwa gets the last word.
As people were talking about the experience of having a lot of recursive thoughts, I was just thinking about my own experience of that because I think it's very normal to have thoughts that are always coming back. In fact, Leonard Cohen, the songwriter, who was also a Zen practitioner and lived in a monastery for many years, he wrote that his experience of that was to call it my greatest hits, those thoughts that always come back. I really liked that because I immediately recognized my own greatest hits in that phrase. But in my experience, the teaching of the three poisons is very useful here with recurring thoughts, the same pattern or idea that comes to you, a lot of sort of belief. So the three poisons are greed or desire, aversion, pushing away, and then delusion, sort of being somewhere else than, or having a different kind of diluted interpretation of what's going on. And for me, aversion comes up very strongly. That's my sort of preferred poison, if you will. And so when those thoughts that are your greatest hits come up, you can look at them from the perspective of, are one of these like greater forces present in this thought? Am I grasping after something? Am I pushing something away? Or am I sort of deluding myself about some phenomenon in my life and engaging in delusion? Sometimes all three of them oftentimes are kind of interwoven with each other. And for me, I find that if I can feel in my body that sort of physicalness of that force, there is like an energy of it. The pushing away has an energy, the grasping has an energy. And that's a way that we can start to recognize what's maybe driving some of that recurring thinking. And the next time that that comes up, when we feel that energy, like, oh, we can recognize it. And then maybe there's something underneath that that reveals itself as sort of the deeper belief or emotion that is driving that thought. And we can have a slightly different relationship with it in the future. So.
Okay, let's finish by saying the four great vows, and then we'll have announcements. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate.
I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root.
Blind passions, one root.
I vow to terminate.
I vow to terminate.
Dharma gates, one mind.
Dharma gates, one mind.
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
The great way of Buddha.
The great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
Would you like the microphone?
Sure.
Some announcements. First of all, welcome to all of you who are here for the first time. It's wonderful to have you with us. You are invited to this public service every Sunday at 10 a.m. Bring your friends. And on the second Sunday of the month is our All Sangha service, which includes our families. So parents and children, caregivers, etc., are especially invited because we have a slightly different format that includes a Dharma talk and a very short meditation for the children, and then age-appropriate activities, and then a second period of meditation for the adults. So we meet as one big group and then split off into separate groups. So the next family service is November 9th. Another wonderful way to get to know the Sangha and to get involved is to come to what we call Together Action. This is our work practice period that meets every Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. We consider hands-on work a vital aspect of our Buddhist practice. As we care for the temple, we care for ourselves. We also have a series of classes and ongoing activities this fall. So we have yoga with David Black every Tuesday from 6:30 to 8 in this room. We have a special sutra study group going on right now of the Lotus Sutra with Chi-Chong Cliff Brown, our AV department, multi-talented, which is every Tuesday from 7 to 8:15, both in person and on Zoom. You would be studying verses from the Lotus Sutra and have the opportunity to share and discuss with the group. We have a new offering, which is a Qigong class on Monday evenings from 6:30 to 8, also here in the Buddha Hall, with one of our members, Shamatha Cyrus Scholl. This class teaches gentle movement, stretching, and mindful breathing to bring body, mind, and spirit into harmony. And there are sign-up sheets for all of these activities on the table in the foyer. And then finally, we have a day of mindfulness one-day retreat coming up November 28th, which is the day after Thanksgiving. This traditionally was called the Stop, Don't Shop retreat. I think we should bring that back. Unplug from media, put aside to-do lists, and follow your urge to meditate. This is from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., which includes periods of sitting and walking meditation, mindful work practice, a rest period, and a delicious vegetarian lunch at midday. So you're invited for that. And then we also offer meditation classes on a regular basis in two formats. One is a Thursday evening format. The next class of that version will begin January 8th. And then we have that same content condensed into an overnight sort of beginner's retreat, a Friday evening through a Saturday at noon. And the next overnight meditation class is December 5th and 6th. And then just a special thank you for folks who have already contributed to our fall fundraising campaign. You probably saw the poster board in the lobby. We have so far raised $12,000 towards our goal of $25,000. And this will support things like scholarships for some of our programs and trainings, repairing water damage to our foundation in the historic temple, that big yellow house next door, upgrading the offerings of the temple library, which if you did not know, we have a cool Buddhist library, and supplementing our building fund for some upcoming major repairs to the historic temple, including roof upgrades, skylight replacement, electrical systems, and new windows on some of the floors. So that's pretty exciting. The temple also has a Sangha care committee. So if you would either like to offer or receive support from the Sangha, maybe this is a meal if you're recuperating from a medical procedure or you're going out of town, you need someone to take your dog for a walk. We have someone in our community who helps organize that, and that is Pomni, or Jackie Dilly is her street name. And if you would like to request support, there's also a sign-up sheet there, or you can email her directly. And then finally, there is an online Sangha. If you would like to join members from other temples, this meets Sunday night, 7 to 8:30 on Zoom. So it's sort of a version of this service held online for people who live at a distance or prefer to join online. Any other announcements? Yes.
Recovery Dharma will meet at noon today in the library of the historic Buddha Hall, the big yellow building next door. And also at the bottom of the steps of the same historic Buddha Hall is a bin full of variety of winter squashes. Take some home so it's easier for me to put back in the truck.
Thank you. Is there together action after service today, Haju?
Not today.
Not today, okay. Any other announcements? Okay. So the temple is entirely supported by your kind donations of time and money. If you would like to make a financial contribution, you can leave it in the fishbowl just outside the door. We also have a Square device, so if you would prefer to donate via credit card, we can do that. And you heard some opportunities to get involved to donate your time, like that Saturday from 3 to 5 period, or if you have any other specific ideas or questions about donating time, you can speak to any of us wearing the gray clothes after the service. Yes?
I just wanted to do the choir. It's the first Sunday of each month. And so I think that's next Sunday, right?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
So that means those who are coming and signed up meet in the historic temple in the library with our choir master. For a spontaneous rehearsal, and then we'll have the song here at the service after. And also meaningful. Music is really, I think, an important in our lives. Not only as music, but just as a practice. That's our mind and heart. Amen.
All right, thank you.
And as you stand up, please take the time to straighten your mat and cushion. And the mats and cushions that are in the inner rows that are actually touching this red carpet, those will stay. The mats and cushions beyond that get stacked. The ones on this side in the back corner and the ones on this side get stacked. We can move one of the chairs and put them up on the platform there so the room's ready for yoga. And then we'll do that as we're going out, but please straighten your mat and cushion, and then we'll do 3 bows to the altar as we leave the room.